Crank up the volume and get ready for real-world bird hunting by listening to the Wingmen Podcast by Eastman's. Now your host, Todd Helms.
This episode's brought to you by Federal Premium Ammunition. You know, I've been shooting Federal for a lot of years, guys, and I can't say enough good things about them. Everything from the TSS Black Cloud loads to the Blue Box Steel, and now the heavy bismuth loads that they have, and of course the traditional tried and true Black Cloud FS steel. They got a load for everything. Last year I had a chance to put some of the new stuff through the paces, and I cannot speak highly enough about it. It swats birds out of the sky, gives me awesome patterns, and with the new heavy bismuth, I can use some of my old shotguns in the field as well and not have to sacrifice performance. So guys, when you reach for shells this year, reach for Federal Premium.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Wingmen Podcast. I'm pretty sure this is episode like 88 now, and I have one of my stalwart guests and good friends, Ed Arnett, back on for, I think this is Trip Around the World 3 for us, I think. But you were tearing it up last weekend out on the plains and prairies someplace. I saw some photos.
Yeah, we had a good hunt. Good opening day. Hot. Man,
Yeah.
It was hot. We were in Nebraska. And I've got this kind of figured out where you hunt grouse the first couple hours in the morning and lounge around in the afternoon and then go shoot doves in the evening. So it works out pretty
There you
good.
go.
But it was brutal. I don't think I've ever hunted in that kind of heat before. But we did pretty good.
Cool. Yeah, I saw some pictures, and it looked like you guys did pretty well. But, you know, it's interesting. When I was talking to, when we were in Montana last year, those guys love hunting sharptails, especially in the heat of the day, because they'll go and they'll hide in coveys and they'll get in the shade in those around little plum thickets and stuff, and they actually hold. They'll hold like quail.
I've noticed that in Montana. I haven't hunted there in a while, but I used to hunt there early in the season.
Yeah.
And they get right in those chokecherry patches and plum thickets, like you say, and they hold really, really well. And in fact, if you're not an experienced hunter, you'll marvel in your shooting or be cussing yourself for missing, and three more get up. So you got to reload quick.
I have come to the realization over the years, because I love hunting upland birds with an over and under or side by side. I love it, but I've come to the realization that when it comes to covey birds like huns, chuckers, and sharptail as well, that I want an autoloader in my hands.
Yeah. Well,
you walk a long ways and you work really hard to get one shot.
But just remember,
man,
quickly unload and reload. The delayed. In fact, that happened to me. So I got a great point out of Drake. This is Drake's third hunting season with my poodle pointer, and this was the second day we hunted. The first day just didn't pan out well, but we didn't even see any birds. The second day I got out and went to a favorite spot in the Sand Hills. And it was funny. I sent my buddy Darrell Smith on a horseback hunt with a guy that I had met previously to that. So they're on horseback running ridges. I just took off by myself, and Drake got really birdie, and he popped up over this ridge, and a snoot full of bird hit him right in the face, and he held this beautiful point. And I doubled, and I did just what I said not to do. I was just marveling in that point and the double, and three more got up, and I had no loaded gun. So we had to go find another single, but we limited out that day. So it was a good day.
That sounds like a ball, man. Good for you. Good for you. Well, since the last time we chatted, I mean, you and I chat on a pretty regular basis about for work things and here and there, and we see each other once in a while. What have you been up to? What have you been doing? What's new in Ed's world?
Well, trying to keep the wheels on the Wildlife Society running and getting ready for our annual conference. We hold a big annual meeting every year. We're going to be in Louisville, Kentucky this fall. So we've been preparing for that. We've been doing a new strategic plan that's keeping us busy. And then just trying to enjoy the summer. We've had a wet summer here in Colorado. Not sure about your neck of the woods up in
It has been. Yep, 100%. It's dried up the last. Yeah, it's dried up the last couple of weeks, but before that, it's wet, and there's still a ton of like green undergrowth. Like the grasses have all matured and headed out, and they're brown. But the little green forbs and stuff on the ground and under the sagebrush, I think you know where I'm going with this. But it's primo. Habitat is primo.
Yeah, the habitat was really good over in Nebraska. The numbers are catching up. The numbers were okay, but they're still way down, even for prairie grouse. But pheasants are in pretty rough shape, and quail in Nebraska, they're all down below the long-term average as our grouse. But the habitat conditions are spectacular, just stunningly good. So we start getting some production. That'll increase our numbers. So
yeah, and I think you and I talked earlier. I think that this bird flu epidemic, or whatever you want to call it, the last 2 years, especially last year, I mean, tons and tons of birds in our when you saw a flock of geese out in the field, if they were there 2 or 3 mornings or evenings in a row, if you drove by, on the third day, there'd be 2 or 3 dead ones out there. And yeah, we shot a lot of sick birds, they come flying into the decoys, and it's like they can barely keep themselves in the air, and you shoot them, and it's like, set that one to the side. We're not eating that one, but there was a lot of it here, a lot of it in waterfowl, and a lot of guys had trouble shooting limits of pheasants last year in our area as well. It seemed like pheasant numbers were way, way down. Part of it was we had the corn wasn't drying out last year. And so we had standing corn all winter, pretty much all winter long, which makes, that's where your pheasants are. They're in the standing corn.
This episode of the Wingmen Podcast is brought to you by Juniper Mountain Coffee. Guys, coffee is important for hunting. Coffee is especially important for waterfowlers. We're constantly burning that candle at both ends, and we need a high-quality fuel source to get us caffeinated and get us on the go. And I tell you what, Juniper Mountain Coffee is, in my opinion, the best coffee that I've ever had. They source high-quality coffees from classic coffee-growing regions and small farmers. Their coffee is premium and as good as it gets. So, hey, when you're reaching for coffee this fall or anytime, reach for Juniper Mountain Coffee.
Back to the pheasant conversation.
Yeah, pheasants and standing corn was the last thing I heard.
Yeah. Everybody was having a tough time killing pheasants last year, and I think it was a combination of we had lots of standing corn that the birds could hide in.
Yeah.
And our numbers were down. Like you'd go out and you'd walk ditch lines, or if you were walking in looking for birds or walk into a duck marsh to set up, you didn't see even any pheasant tracks in the snow, which is really, really rare. So our birds are definitely down, and I don't know about what you guys look like down there, but I'm hoping that the habitat just increases bird numbers through the roof.
It looks like in Nebraska, I don't have Colorado data handy, but I worry a little bit about that northeastern part. I mean, they were getting golf ball to softball size hail. And it doesn't matter what time of year it is. You get hit by something like that, you're in trouble. But, Nebraska looks to be down about 44% on pheasants alone over the 20-year average. I happen to have my stats here in front of me. It's down about 19% from 2021 numbers and 12% over the 5-year average. So, overall looking pretty low. Quail are looking a lot better in kind of the eastern and southeast part of Nebraska, but they're down in other parts. And then, like I say, prairie grouse, it's kind of hit and miss. They're out there. We saw one thing a guy told me. He rides around. The guy that took my buddy Darrell horseback riding. He said he's been seeing lots of adults, but not very many broods. So that would tell you the production's down.
Yeah.
The leg count stayed pretty similar from some of the folks I talked to in Nebraska for sharptails and prairie chickens, but the production they were a little worried about. So, but I definitely shot a couple of juvies, and there's birds out there, but we got a little ways to go to come out of that drought. And like you said, if you got standing corn, that has a hell of a dampering on your hunting capabilities.
Yeah, that's where all of the pheasants go. And they just don't have a reason to leave it. They just stay in it. The only thing they don't do in it is roost in it. Yep. It's crazy. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But we are one of the reasons that I wanted to have you back on is we're getting ready to drop our sage grouse film that you starred in and made me look good on starring opposite of me.
I thought the opposite. I thought you made me look good. So yeah, all right.
Ed was the hunter, was the other hunter on the sage grouse hunt, and not just a hunter, because the film's not just about hunting. It's about sage grouse and the dilemma that faces them and the uphill battle that I feel like we're starting to dig out of. Our elect counts were up about 6% roughly here in Wyoming, and locally, and you and I've had this conversation before. Locally, they don't even really monitor sage grouse here, right where I live, because our habitat's so intact and so good, but our bird numbers are a lot higher than they have been. I make about a 2-hour run south to do a lot of fishing in the summertime, and I'm running that stretch of highway right at daylight. And there was 2 different times this summer where right as it's getting gray light, there were whole broods of sage grouse in the road, in the highway. And I managed to get it shut down before I plowed through them, but they all flushed. And then when I came back, there'd be like one dead in the road, somebody clipped one. Sure. But
yeah,
I've seen quite a few roadkill sage grouse, which tells me that we got birds. And I've seen sage grouse and heard people talking about seeing sage grouse in places this year that we haven't seen sage grouse in a really long time. So I'm hoping it's a bright spot. I'm hoping all the moisture that we got, Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, parts of all those states, we got pounded last winter. Colorado was in the same boat, northwestern Colorado.
Yep.
And what was good for, we talk about the interconnectivity of mule deer, pronghorn, and sage grouse, but what destroyed the mule deer populations and really put them under the thumb was kind of had the opposite effect for sage grouse because of their habits and how they operate. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm still a little worried about some of my honey holes down in that southwest part of the south central part of Wyoming. I haven't seen the Wyoming data. I know the numbers are up a little bit this year overall, but in that area, I kind of wondered what happened. And, I was talking to some local rancher friend. They're still seeing birds, but the difference there is sage grouse can sit on top of the snow and eat sagebrush. That's all they eat in the winter. So the ungulates got pounded as well.
Really hard.
Especially antelope. I mean, they really took it hard.
Well, and they got a pneumonia on top of the hard winter that ravaged that herd down there, and it was rough. But yeah, like you said, the sage grouse can get on top of the snow. They burrow down in it, and they live in it like in a little snow cave. They can fly to new habitat. They can do a lot. They have a lot of options that ungulates just don't have.
They do move around quite a bit. The good news is they can fly, and they do fly considerable distances at times for their wintering area. We still don't know a ton about wintering habitat. They're starting to gather a little bit more information, but there was a point in time, and right before the 2015 listing decision, where there was like a study, or at least a couple that were starting to document, multiple tens of miles, 70 to 100 mile movements to go to winter habitat. And yeah, it's nice when you can fly around. And that's the difference largely between, native prairie grouse and something like pheasants, or even native birds like bob white quail. They don't get up and move a whole lot. They have all their habitat and their home ranges in a pretty tight area relative to a landscape scale bird like sharptails or sage grouse. They can get up and move around a little bit and take advantage of different resources. But overall, I think they fared okay through the winter and definitely through the spring. The numbers they're hit and miss. This is a classic scientist type answer. It's like, it depends. It does really depend on where you're at, because
100%.
And are still in drought-like conditions, and others aren't. I can tell you that the numbers have not come back enough or for a long enough period of time to open up a couple of seasons in Colorado. Units that are closed, units 4 and 5 are still closed. But the numbers in North Park, I'm hearing, are really good. That's where I'm headed this weekend. They're up, 40-50%, I think, on the LEC counts. So, and I think Wyoming this year was 15% on average. The 6%, I think, was last year.
Okay.
That was last. I just found this recently. It's the overall statewide. They're up 15% in 20.
I'll take whatever increase we can get. You know what I mean? And if we can get it in double digits, more's the better. You know.
The one cautionary note there, because I had to argue with some industry folks a few years back about the sage grouse. Everything's working fine. Sage grouse are up X% over the previous year or the last 2 years. And they were. You remember those good years a few years ago, 15, 16, 17 in there.
Yeah, that was
I had the lowest number ever. Or one of the lowest points ever. So it's all relative, right? And the long-term data still are indicating somewhere with 2-3% annual loss. So we got a ways to go, but I'm garnering some more optimism that if we get out of the drought and get more habitat going, we ought to talk a little about habitat restoration a little later. Got a couple of things to share on that, but hopefully this will be a good season for hunting and a good season for bird survival and winter survival, and we can get some numbers back.
Yeah, that would be cool. And it's I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that you and I get along was we do agree on a lot of things, but we also agree to disagree on some things as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I agree with you 100% in that it's very regional, and it's some places, like you said, you've got your honey holes and you haven't seen a rebound there, but there's other spots that you go to and there's lots of birds. So it does depend. I'm 100% with you on if we can get a trend reversal of getting out of drought and improving the habitat that we have, and then maybe restoring some habitat that you've lost, or I shouldn't say you, this is your fault, Ed,
that we've magic wand and 15 acres of habitat disappeared. Yeah.
But I mean, that's seriously though, that's one of the biggest things. I mean, we can look at drought, but one of the biggest things is we're losing habitat at a rapid level. And it's not just sage grouse that are affected by that, as we know, and as we've discussed. And until we start reclaiming and restoring some of that stuff, we're going to have an uphill battle and not be able to really take advantage of wet years and non-drought years like this one. Yep. But what are some of the projects that you've seen?
Well, USGS has got a bunch of long-term habitat study and a number of universities as well. University of Wyoming just published a really nice monograph in one of our journals with the Wildlife Society on response to habitat treatments. But the interesting thing about that is that the grouse it depends on the treatment, but if you use prescribed fire or mowing and various other techniques to manipulate habitat and try to improve it, it doesn't seem like the grouse are responding the way we might have predicted. In fact, they're not. It's just not much of a response at all, or it's negative. So the researchers there, Jeff Beck at the University of Wyoming and some of his colleagues, suggest work on invasive annual grass, cheatgrass, most notably, and removing juniper seems to definitely have a positive effect. So those are two things that I picked up on in that monograph that, it's a long-term study from one area. It may vary, of course, in different conditions, but I think the restoration really needs to focus on getting the cheatgrass under control where it's possible to do so. I think there are some areas that are probably just sacrificial areas, unfortunately, and they may never come back. And that, so I think we have to look at the investment relative to the rate of return, like anything in life, our own financial investments or whatever that might be. And we can't keep pouring more money into certain areas that just are not going to be reclaimed. So there's some prioritization that some of these studies are trying to do. We should still be focusing on retaining the large intact landscapes as much as possible. We're still losing that core. That was highlighted in the film. But this generational funding that was just handed down from Congress through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, and there's a lot of criticism of that. But I can tell you there are boatloads of money going into restoration of sagebrush ecosystems, wetland areas within sagebrush. A lot of that's going into this ecosystem, and I think wetland habitat restoration is going to really pay off, as well as the juniper removal and then the attack on the invasive species, which is not limited to the Great Basin. It's all but destroyed a lot of the habitat in the Great Basin, Idaho, Nevada, parts of Oregon, and it's in Wyoming. I distinctly remember standing in fields of cheatgrass. So Wyoming is not out of the woods on the fire cheatgrass cycle either.
Not even close, and I can think of areas right here within 30 miles that it's a sea of it. You walk out there and it's just a sea of cheatgrass, and it's like when you get into it, there's nothing there. There's no birds in there. I don't know if this is 100% spot on, but maybe you've noticed this too. But it seems like I have noticed the only animal that I have seen that will utilize cheatgrass, like eat it, are huns. I have
not seen that or read that, but
exactly.
It's possible,
Yeah.
When I studied bighorns down, I know cheatgrass was not as prevalent back in the 80s when I did my bighorn sheep study and encampment, but they would definitely eat it when it was greening up.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't really extensive then, If that was in a burned area and a highly disturbed natural fire, and there was definitely some cheatgrass in there, and they would definitely eat it when it greened up, but that's about it.
Yeah, and it regrows so fast. They eat it and then it regrows, I haven't seen it a lot, but I've gotten into coveys of huns later in the year in patches of cheatgrass, and it was almost like they were in there. Like there'd be like a little patch of cheatgrass where there was disturbed ground or whatever, and there'd be birds in there. Now, whether they were eating the cheatgrass heads or whether they were just in there, but it wasn't just once; it was multiple times. So,
was it in a situation? So, if you remember from the film, which it was so long ago, but we highlighted there, we talked about cheatgrass very briefly in the film, but that patch that we ran into was immersed in a patch of really good sagebrush habitat with good natural habitat, good bunch grasses and forbs and stuff. Was it a situation like that?
It was.
A sea of it's all
no. It wasn't a sea of it. It was just a little isolated pocket. So I don't know what they found in it, but it was enough of a pattern to recognize, and I kind of went, huh. Enough where I'd see a patch of cheatgrass and I'd go over there with the dog.
Yeah, right.
But
carefully
I don't know,
because that's not good for dogs, of course.
No, I know that's a good point. I always after I upland hunt, I always lay my dogs down and go through them with a fine tooth comb to get any grass-ons.
Yep.
Because those things,
they're pretty rough.
They're nasty.
Well, it's interesting. It sounds to me like those coveys of huns had choices. So
I think so. Like I said, it's one of those things. It's just an observation, and it was in one spot. It's not like I see it all over the place, but I was curious if you had seen anything similar.
I haven't. Piques my interest a little bit though, Because
Yeah.
you often hear nothing utilizes cheatgrass. Nothing.
Right. Which, as you just
Something.
said about the sheep, is not 100% true,
Right.
but it's definitely not a good thing. I don't want to color it
Yes,
like,
right.
oh yeah, it's not that bad. No, it's horrible.
Yeah.
But oh man, it's interesting about what you said about the funding, though. I think so many times we have a tendency, and I'm saying we as people in general have a tendency to maybe throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to some things. And in a lot of these things, at first blush, I would just be honest and say I'm not a fan of the Inflation Reduction Act. But then when you start looking at, well, there's funding for habitat restoration that comes out of, well, that's not a bad thing. And then there's money that goes over here to something else that I approve of. And I'm like, well, that's not a bad thing. It's interesting when you start breaking this thing down, and as sportsmen especially, we should be very aware of where the funding for our projects comes from, where the funding to support what we do comes from. I mean, yeah, most of the North American model of wildlife management is founded by hunters. We know that. But you've got other sources of funding as well, and you've dealt with that firsthand.
Yeah, I don't have all of the breakdown. The TRCP did a really nice job of breaking down both the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. I think the bipartisan infrastructure law gets better favor, if you will, from the public because of the word bipartisan in it.
Bipartisan, right.
And the IRA was not bipartisan. It was passed on party lines. But when you really break that down, there's a considerable amount of funding in there for conservation. So you're absolutely right. Some things on the surface aren't maybe what they seem when you get into the details. But yeah, that funding is going to be critical for the habitat restoration and invasive species attacks on or restoration of invaded native habitats with cheatgrass and such. It's going to be really critical. We haven't had that kind of funding before. We've had funding that has come through the Farm Bill, through the Sage Grouse initiative, and some other initiatives. But yeah, when you really break down conservation funding, just think about the Farm Bill alone. There were 30. Now you have to make the assumption that all of that money goes into true conservation, whether that's easements or habitat improvements. It may not all be 100% what people would define as conservation, but there were $30 billion in the last Farm Bill. $6 billion a year for 5 years, over a 5-year period. So $30 billion dwarfs what the 4 million women put into conservation. Yes. And I don't mean to downplay that at all, but I think we have to think with a little bit more open mind about how funding how conservation is funded and how habitat restoration is funded. And it's a bigger pie than people think. I think people hang up too much on what our slice of the pie is. I don't care there's never, and I say this a little bit flippantly, but there's never enough money for conservation. Some would argue, well, we can't even spend what we have in the Farm Bill. And that's actually true based on some of the rules. There's not enough match to get all the funding out. I think, they're working on that through this last Farm Bill to get that money out and change the match around a little bit. But I would still argue we don't have enough money for conservation. I mean, just to get rid of all the junipers in all the areas that are priority is hundreds of millions of dollars, if not million or billions of dollars. So yeah, we'll take all we can get.
Yeah, and that's just one spot in the West.
Exactly. Yeah,
we're not talking about the stuff that they're dealing with in other parts of the country.
Right.
Where you've
and the coastline.
You look at those poor guys in the Southeast, and with their turkey numbers, and you talk about a historical, I guess for lack of a better term, poor area of turkey hunting and turkey hunting culture, and they're on the downhill slide, man, their bird numbers are so low. And it has to do with a lot of different factors, but one of them is habitat and forestry management. And we've learned a lot, but that's just one. What you're talking about juniper removal, that's just one area. If you start looking at all the different areas around this country where we're trying to do restoration work or habitat work or all these projects, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And so when you say, there's never enough money for conservation, when you look at it in the big picture, you're absolutely right.
Not true. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we hang up a little too. I say we pretty loosely here, but there's kind of this ongoing argument about, will sportsmen pay for all of conservation? And others arguing no, they don't. And it's, to me, it's a hollow argument. Maybe not hollow is not the right way to think about it, but it's the wrong argument. I mean, we need all of the money. And in fact, we got into some conversations at our conference last year with some individuals, and they wanted to replace the sportsman's dollars, which is estimated recently at $1.4 billion annually when you factor in PR dollars, license sales, and some other factors of donations and a few other things. And it's not the full suite of donations, but $1.4 billion. They wanted to replace that with RAWA, Recovering America's Wildlife Act. Well, that died on the political vine really fast and became a sacrificial lamb in the last omnibus that we had. But why would you replace it? Why wouldn't you add it? Now we might have $2.8 billion for habitat and life conservation. So to me, it's cumulative. It all counts. Everything counts. So, and I think my contention is, Todd, is that if we had a clear and quantifiable definition that everybody could agree on what actually constitutes conservation. Think about the 30 by 30 initiative. If we actually could define and agree upon a definition of what constitutes conservation, I think we'd all be a little surprised at what we could pay or what the funding sources would be to pay for those types of pieces of conservation. And the sportsman's slice may not look as big to some as it does today, but it doesn't matter, right? It's conservation. It's going into restoration and conservation. That's all important, all of it. I use the Farm Bill as a good example because that's never been counted toward wildlife conservation. And the last Farm Bill was $30 billion. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Like you said, it dwarfs the sportsman's contribution, on all the monies that are there. It does dwarf it. I've had this same conversation with a couple different guys about how, in the grand scheme of things, the sportsman's dollars that do go towards conservation and wildlife management they're significant. I mean, it would be missed. It would be, it would be missed. There's no doubt about it if it was gone. But there's corporations that's their operating budgets are more than that.
That's right.
And there's school systems. The New York public school system's operating budget is substantially more than that. And I don't remember the exact number, but when we start looking at it in the big picture, in a big way, it's not as big a slice of the pie as we think it is. And lest you guys listening to this start throwing things at your radio or whatever you're listening on and screaming at me, where I'm going with this, Ed, is what's your take on opening up? What's the word I'm looking for here? Kind of like what you guys did with your show, with your expo, opening it up to outside non-traditional, non-hunting users.
Well, I think, there's a couple different angles I could take on that. I'm gonna thwart what happened at our conference for just a minute and just say there are a lot of people in this country, 335 million people. And the public trust doctrine is there for all of them, not just the hunting public. And I think people tend to forget that. Right. There is this divide, not divide, that's not the right word. there is this issue though of what people pay. People do pay taxes, and they pay into their federal government and the refuge system and those kinds of things. If they happen to be wise enough to buy a duck stamp, I tell my students in my policy class, what's one thing you could do as a non-hunter tomorrow that would make a huge difference in conservation immediately? And the correct answer is buy a duck stamp or even a hunting license. Right. And then I ask them a few other questions to follow down a thread of critical thinking about the points I'm trying to get at. But my point here would be that all the wildlife are held in the trust for all people, and sportsmen have had a dominating role in this for sure. There's no question about that. And our funds have supported conservation, particularly at the state level, research for any number of different species. But if we could tap into the what people call non-consumptive use, I don't think it's non-consumptive, but just
I don't either. And your home state of Colorado is learning how consumptive it really is
with mountain biking and such. But
yes,
if we could tap into that with the old CARE, I can never remember the acronym there, but the backpack tax. If we could start getting more revenues generated by all of the public, the problem with that is they're going to want a seat at the table.
Yes, and that's where I was going. That's where I was going with this.
But I think we've got to get behind an agenda for conservation.
This episode of the Wingmen Podcast is brought to you by Cryptek. Guys, being concealed and staying in the field as long as you want to be in the field are two very important tenets of waterfowl hunting. And I have to be honest with you, I love the fact that I can align with a company like Cryptek and be partnered with them because we share the same ideals, we have the same passions, and it shows. It shows in the products that they develop, in the camouflage patterns that they have, and I am stoked to be partnered with them. Check out the full lineup of everything they have, and hey, shoot me a message here at Wingmen Headquarters, and I can give you a rundown of exactly what pieces I like the best from Cryptek.
Now, the hard red line for me and for most people is the animal rights activism and the anti-hunting.
And calling themselves conservationists.
Right.
Exactly. Hijacking that term when they're not.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So I think my experience has been most sportsmen and women have been pretty open to having all of the public engaged, but that hard red line appears far too often by those that are pushing the non-hunting and anti-hunting agenda.
Yeah.
So,
and yeah,
that's paying for anything other than paying their taxes and then hoping the Forest Service does something great with the money or whatever the congressional creation is. So
exactly. And what you guys are seeing in Colorado, which is super interesting, is you have the mightiest elk herd on the planet, and your calf recruitment numbers have been in the toilet the last few years because cows can't find a secure place to have calves because they're constantly getting shoved around by recreational users. And that being not
and predation.
Yeah, I mean, there's
other things.
Yeah.
The recreation's having an impact, no question.
Yep. So it's interesting when you bring that up. It's like, is there such a thing as a non-consumptive user? And I don't really think there is. And so when you start looking at 30 point whatever billion dollars in the Inflation Reduction Act, okay, that starts to make a little bit more sense now when we're looking at, again, a big, broad spectrum view of things. It's a big onion. There's lots of layers, and it's like I love talking to you about this stuff because you're so knowledgeable. And I mean, it's your job. It's what you do, right?
I feel naive some days, believe me.
Well, don't we all?
Well, and just a couple of more points on, the line of questioning here. We shouldn't be afraid of having hard conversations with people that don't agree with us. That's the problem with the divide in our country for any number of reasons, political and otherwise. Right. And it's not getting us anywhere. And it seems to me that that conservation is something we can all get our minds wrapped around and get behind and build an agenda and a policy around. And in fact, if you talk to somebody like Shane Mahoney, who's a strong proponent of the North American model, he's getting to a point now where he's saying, forget the model. We need a conservation policy, a North American, maybe even a global conservation policy. And he's absolutely right. I think we focus a little too much on the North American model and not enough about what it doesn't do and what we need to have that breadth in a conservation agenda. And it's kind of all over the board, but sportsmen and women shouldn't be afraid to have some conversations with people that they don't agree with or are pushing a different agenda. And I think, we're not going to agree, and we'll probably be, have a staunch red line like I mentioned earlier. But we at least need to have the conversation because these people vote, and you saw what happened in Washington. You're seeing what's happening in Colorado. A lot of that's happening in states that don't have hunting and fishing written into their constitution. But, people that don't hunt outnumber us greatly. Yeah. And we need to change. We need to quit talking in an echo chamber and start talking more to the people we don't talk to. We need PBS specials on hunting. We need, I love your show, but you're talking to us. You're talking to
you're absolutely right.
A certain crowd. We need to be getting this information out. Why hunting is conservation, what those dollars go toward, just all of the different components about why hunting is conservation. And we're probably going to have to make some trade-offs. And I know the old adage of give an inch, they'll take a mile. That's true, but they might take it all if we're not careful without having conversations at all about it. And certainly I'll take your money. I mean, if there was a backpack tax, whatever we want to call it, and that money goes into a wildlife viewing stamp that you could buy, or what Missouri does, I don't even remember what the percentage is. It's like a tenth of a penny or some ridiculously small number, but it adds up to multi-millions of dollars that they can actually run a wildlife program that includes a strong non-game program and a game management program. Missouri's a pretty good model of that. They tax everybody. So anyway,
that's what the public trust doctrine, if wildlife belongs to everybody, maybe everybody should be paying for it.
That's right.
And
that's where they're going to want to have a vote, and that gets dicey with some in the sporting community. That's understandable,
100%, there's so much at stake because we look at it and go, this is a way of life, this is a heritage, this is tradition. I just got done hunting with my 8-year-old daughter last year. In Wyoming, we're blessed when it comes to like small game stuff. I can get them started really young. Yeah. And we were having a great time creating those. This is such a cliched thing in today's society, but creating core memories. But that's exactly what we were doing, Ed. Yeah. And we were having a great time. We killed a bird and took it home. She cleaned it. We helped me cook it, and she sat down and she ate it, kept the feathers. We're going to do all this. It was awesome. Yeah. And to have the idea that could be stripped away because somebody wants a vote, that's hard to swallow. That's hard to swallow.
Well, and I look at it a little bit like, people trying to tell me what I can and can't put in my body. I put almost 90%. I mean, I'll buy a big fat ass ribeye when I go to a steakhouse and I'm in DC or somewhere traveling up to go to Cheyenne or wherever. But mostly we're eating wild game. And
we're the same way.
I can't procure my own organic food. I take it from that angle too. But for anyone throwing stuff at the radio, I just want to say this loud and clear: the Wildlife Society takes on difficult conversations. We do have people come to our meetings that maybe you don't agree with, but that's our forum. That's who we are. We are the Wildlife Society, and we bring in all people for conversations to a point. I mean, we have rules and principles and such, But
you have to, or it turns into a circus.
Exactly. But if anybody goes to our website, we have strong position statements on the model. We have strong position statements on hunting. We have a pretty interesting one that everyone should read on our position on anti-hunting groups. We're pretty firm on our position on anti-hunting, and we have a position statement on guns, et cetera, et cetera. So we haven't drifted from our principles just because we have a hard conversation. Someone that shows up at our meeting doesn't necessarily mean that we have all of a sudden been swayed to change our positions. That's just not the case at all. But I can see the writing on the wall, and I'm trying to embrace some of these conversations and work with the community on what's next. What we can't just stick our head in the sand and ignore groups that are coming after us. Or individuals. We need a campaign, and we need to go on offense, quite frankly, because we're always defense, it seems like.
I agree with that. As an ex-coach and old athlete, man, I studied a lot of tape. I studied a lot of film on my opponents, and I'd call other coaches who got done playing a certain team that I had next, and I just got done playing them. Maybe I beat them and maybe I didn't. And last week, that was my opponent, right? That was the other guy. But this week, I need some intel like, hey, saw you guys had a pretty good field shooting percentage on this team. How'd you get your shooters free? They play pretty tight man-to-man. How'd you free up your shooters? What was something I can look for? I don't think that's any different than in what we're talking about right now. If you don't know who your enemy is, and I did air quotes there, how are you going to know what the threats are that are coming at you?
Brings up that old adage: keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah, man. And it is. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I think what you said earlier about having that Walter Sobchak mentality from the Big Lebowski's, like, across this line, you will not, and dead serious. There's a line in the sand, and it's like, this is as far as you're going to push me. I'm willing to have open conversations and talk with you like a rational human being. And the minute this line is crossed, we're done. Yeah. And I think we forget that sometimes, where it's like, well, that person's a blade of grass. They'll talk to that guy and talk to that guy. And it's like, no, just because I'm willing to have a hard conversation about conservation, about wildlife management, about Second Amendment rights, I have a line, and that line's not going to be crossed.
That's a good personal strategy for anyone, is know what that is.
Yeah.
And know what you're trying to achieve in a conversation and what the ultimate outcome might be. And we believe it or not, we found I've got off the 80, focus on the 80 or 90% you agree on bullshit. I'll take 5 to 10% if it's meaningful. We actually worked with the Humane Society on wild horses or feral horses and burros.
Interesting. Tell me about that. Well, the great evil. Let's hear it.
It was before my time as CEO, but when we were deep into feral horse and burros, and we still play in that space a little bit, but we partnered to the extent that was practical with Humane Society, because they, at that time anyway, they saw that this is unsustainable and it's affecting native species. Right. So. I think when there's, a lemon to make lemonade with, you make the damn lemonade. So,
yeah.
Well,
and like I said, that was a long time ago
too.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I think, I think it's important that you have conversations like this one right here, because it makes you think. And if you stop thinking, you're stagnant. I used to have a saying when I was coaching, when I was teaching, I had a saying that nothing grows in a comfort zone. It's like nothing grows there. It's a dead zone. Your comfort zone's a dead zone. If you're in pain, you're going to grow from that. Yep. If you're happy, You're going to grow from that. If you're just here, status quo, and nothing's hard, nothing's challenging, you're just kind of meh, what are you gaining?
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's no different when it comes to wildlife management, habitat management. If we're doing the same thing all the time, just because, well, we need to manage this for this amount of consumption, or we need to manage this habitat to carry X number of this, that's not a good thing.
Right.
That's not a good thing. You know, we talked earlier in this episode about the fluctuation of sage grouse numbers and wild game bird numbers, and how there's a natural fluctuation to these things that's based upon, and we do the most we can do in the North American model to help those animals, right?
Yep.
But there's only so much we can do, you know, whether you want to
so much you can control.
That's what I guess that's what I want to say.
That's the change factor in there. If it rained 20 inches a year across the entire state of Wyoming every year at the perfect time where it didn't kill chicks, and the habitat was great, and we had the executive order in play, and you know, all the things that go with managing energy development and such, we'd probably have plenty of sage grouse forever.
Yeah.
And how it happens now, is it?
Now you're talking about utopian stuff, and as an English teacher, we could talk about utopian versus dystopian societies all day long. There was a little thing in my worldview called the fall in the Garden of Eden, and that's when the utopia was done right there.
Change is, you know, the old Ben Franklin's adage. I'll paraphrase it. The only thing certain in life is death and taxes. I have always thrown change in there. Yeah. Guaranteed things change. Yeah. And, you know, it used to be attributed to Darwin, and I've done this myself, but apparently he did not say this if you go back and read The Origin of Species. But the reality, the strong survive, but also those most adapted to change. I mean, in the apocalypse tomorrow, cockroaches, coyotes, and white-tailed deer are probably going to make it.
And teachers.
Yeah.
So I get every bug known to man. But yeah, no, you're spot on. Change is inevitable, and if you don't adapt to it,
got to be adapted to it.
Yeah, it's going to be rough, and that goes for our sportsmen's groups and sportsmen in general. We've got to be able to read the water. We've got to be able to read the landscape and adapt to it. And yeah, you know, I've said for years, and you and I've had this conversation too. I've said for years, I think probably the ideal, and it's interesting what you said about Shane Mahoney saying we need a global conservation policy. Because I've thought for years that the North American model comes up a tad short on one area that the European model nails. And I go into, I'm just going to use two examples. I go into the Ducks Unlimited philosophy and the Delta philosophy. They're both management philosophies. They're both trying to get the same outcome, which is the most duck production possible. And while Ducks Unlimited is all about habitat, and Delta's like, yeah, habitat's super important. We're going to support that, but we need to manage predators at the same time. And you brought up the point about when we talked about Colorado having, you know, your elk population's in trouble, not in trouble, but it's on the downswing.
Yeah, they're on the downswing.
A big part of that problem is you guys have a ton of bears.
We do have a ton of bears.
A ton of bears.
No spring season.
Right.
And you know, no bait. I've killed a bear in Colorado. It's relatively straightforward if you're targeting them and looking for them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Fall. And I suspect most elk and deer hunters have one in their pocket, a tag in their pocket.
Yeah, I know I do here in Wyoming, but yeah. I think probably a real holistic looking model takes predator management into account for that, or invasive species management into that. You know, we said feral horses. We talk about cheatgrass. We talk about a lot of different things. Again, it's a big pie. There's a lot of layers to that onion.
And that is a counter argument of some groups, as you are fully aware. They're they seem largely opposed to predator killing for the sake of growing game populations. I can have that discussion and debate with folks as long as they're willing to accept some level of legal harvest and lethal methods for conflict.
Right.
I asked a colleague of mine, and he'll remain unnamed, and the group will remain unnamed, but it's someone I worked with in the past, and I asked him a simple question. I said, does your group accept any level of lethal methods for conflict resolution and legal harvest to a sustainable level to sustain populations? The answer was, I'm not sure. I said, well, until you know, he's brand new ED. So until you know that for a fact, you're not going to be sure what path you're on.
Yeah, exactly.
Very different paths. If and I suspect he couldn't answer it because it's mixed. Some of his board members, big donors, members, that kind of thing, are staunch anti-predator killing, and others probably understand population level management and can accept some. But I said, until you get that resolved, it's going to be pretty hard for us to have a meaningful conversation.
Right.
I don't know which direction you're headed. And, we may be talking about going one direction, and then later you get forced by a donor or a board member to go another, and now we're at odds, potentially. This is all more or less hypothetical, but
yeah.
My point is that predator management in the presence of humans and desired outcomes for wildlife population, and this gets at the whole mutualism thing, whether you feel like wildlife have all the rights of humans versus, they're here for our use. And I think it's a little bit of both. I probably fit into that, what they call a pluralist. I hunt. I have no problem hunting, but I think very highly of wildlife. And I probably have closer relationships with some wild animals than people. However, it kind of comes down to that philosophy. And if you're in that mentality that wildlife have all the right, we're probably not going to be able to have much of a conversation. Right. You're never going to support any harvest management at all. And that's where it gets dicey on
it's
trying
super,
to build a broader policy with everybody at the table. That's where it gets dicey.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I've had this conversation with a few people when it comes to the predator management side of things. It's been interesting to watch on my brother's farm in Iowa. My dad he had a group of raccoons attack his bird dog on the back porch one night. And I'm not talking like two. There was a whole, like a little gang of raccoons. Yeah. And they went after her and created a big ruckus, So he was like, all right, this is ridiculous. I'm going to start trapping raccoons. Well, he's taken somewhere in the neighborhood of like 350 raccoons off that farm in 2.5 years.
Holy cow.
And I guess it's closer to 3 years he's been doing this now. And he runs the little dog-proof raccoon traps. And he's caught some skunks and he's caught some possums too. But then he's also gone after the coyotes. And he's not much of a coyote hunter, and he'll admit that. So they brought in a trapper because they had a ton of coyotes too. And they knocked down the coyote population. And I'm not talking like there's none. You still hear them at night. You still see a raccoon here and there, but they're not everywhere like they were. And this farm, Ed, has gone from having very few turkeys on it and a handful of pheasants to like 20 broods of pheasants this year. This is a 200-acre farm. Yeah, but that Midwestern farm ground is a production powerhouse. Very yes. Yeah. And so they even had a clutch of Huns on there for the first time ever.
Interesting.
It is. And so it was like, you can't just knock down the nest predators or you can't just knock down coyotes because then your nest predator population goes through the roof. So they did both. Their whitetail production went up. They had turkey. They had, I don't know how many different broods of turkeys that stayed on the place and were there. he's sending me pictures my brother's sending me pictures in his food plots. He's like, I almost got more birds than I can handle because I can't plant enough food for them. Just wild what that impact can have. And like I said, standing there, I'm FaceTiming with him the other day, and my dad's like, "Oh, here comes a coon down the driveway." So it's not like he's got them all,
right?
But man,
he probably couldn't get them all anyway.
I don't think so. And it's one of those things where he was able to make a big enough dent through management that it gave it. I guess what I'm saying is it balanced things out.
I was going to go down that balance path myself. It's like that's a little bit what I was alluding to. In today's world, humans are part of it. I happen to be in the camp that believe that. We are a species on this earth, and we share it. We just happen to have a little more manipulative ability than other species, right? And control over what we do. But we are part of the ecosystem, and if we want lots of pheasants and turkeys and quail, what's wrong with managing the predator population to achieve that? We're not wiping them out. In fact, the science would show you that the more you shoot coyotes and certain predators, the more you're releasing them biologically. Think of what's going to happen to all those deer and elk that made it through the winter and all those harsh winters. They're going to be fat and sassy because they got lots of food. This is just basic habitat population relationships.
Right.
But if you're pounding on a predator population, you're going to increase their reproductive potential, at least for some, like coyotes. So that brings me to the next point. You got to continue it. That's what I've seen, is that if you may be able to slack off for a couple of years, but if he really wants to maintain those birds on his property, probably going to have to keep that going.
Mm-hmm. No, and he has, and he'll continue to. It's funny. He's retired and he doesn't have anything else to do, so he gets up in the morning, pours a cup of coffee, and goes and runs his trap line, every day. Right. And it's good for him, and it's good for the property. But it just goes back into this whole conversation that we've had about balance and about there's a lot of slices to the pie. It's a big pie, and that's why I wanted to have you on. That's why I love having you on. Is you bring a perspective that is, it's pro hunting. It's pro gun. It is, blue-blooded American as it gets, but you're a critical thinker. And I love that because we can have these deeper conversations that they need to be had. They need to be. Things like this need to be talked about and hashed out. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Cool. Well, where are you
from our sage grouse video? But that was
it's okay. It's okay. But it doesn't really deviate from the sage grouse video because it's all tied into it. It's all tied into it. And we're finally in a spot where we've got it where we want it to be. Lindsay's putting the finishing touches on it, and it's ready to go. And
it's a good
thank
story.
you. It was fun. Yeah. It was fun to produce. Ike was teasing me. He's like, good grief, I watched you age in that video because it took us 2.5 years to create it. We watched it. We started it with the idea, like I've said before, that, let's go film a sage grouse hunt. And then it was like, no, there's way more to this story than just a hunt. Right. And we did film a hunt with you, and we had a great time, killed some birds, ate some birds. It was awesome. Yeah. But then we interviewed, I don't know how many people that were
you got most of the
deeply
actors
involved.
In Wyoming, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it was super fun. It was a super fun project. And my hope with it is that it brings awareness. I hope not just to the sage grouse and habitat, but there's lots of other issues there. Yep. I hope it brings a lot of different awareness on a lot of different levels. I hope that somewhere somebody watches this and goes, that never even knows what a sage grouse is, and goes, oh, that's really cool. I wonder how I can get involved in conversation in my backyard. If they're doing that out there, what can I do here? I don't have sage grouse, but I might have prairie chickens. I might have, good grief, maybe some grouse in Europe, maybe capercaillie habitat rest production. I don't know.
Well, I hope we answered the question, why should I care? about a species I've never seen, may never see, certainly may never hunt, and this ecosystem I might drive through on my way to Vegas or whatever.
Yeah.
That's that question, because balance was written all through that whole piece. Bob Budd said it specifically, and a few others. This is about balance. But he also mentioned something that I wanted to play off of a little bit here. It's a new way of doing business. I really think that's powerful in ways that most people won't fully appreciate. It's not like the wildlife profession and wildlife conservationists haven't been working together, but I've never seen anything like this in my career. The planning effort that was pulled together to get to that not warranted decision, as we talked about in the film, is simply unprecedented. And interestingly enough, today I brought that up in talking with someone who's very worried about anti-hunting of waterfowl in Argentina and around the world. And I said, well, I think the best way to really put something together, and part of it's they have no data, but I said, put a coalition together. Bring anybody that you think might be interested in this, including people that don't agree with you, and get them in a room and start talking some things through. Because it's hard, though, and a lot of people don't want to put that level of effort in because it's just hard. It's easier to design something with people who think alike with.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You're going to gain more by bringing all these diverse entities together, and that's what the sage grouse effort did. And it isn't perfect. It hasn't fulfilled all of its goals yet, but we'll get there. But we can't give up. That's for damn sure. We can't give up on it. But I do think these big coalitions addressing big issues is the right way to be doing business in conservation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I talked to a wide array of folks, like you mentioned, everybody from the gal at the Audubon Society to, dude at the energy development, it was like energy industry. And I had you on there. I mean, you name it. I tried to cover all of the bases with that. Yep. And it just trying to tell the whole story, right down to the bird farming thing, which I know is highly, highly controversial. But I'll just be frank with you. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go there, and I didn't want to film that. And once we looked at it, we went through the facility, we looked at everything and listened to Carl explain some things and talk about his vision in particular for what they're doing. I went, holy smokes. This actually makes some sense. When he started talking about using his birds to develop vaccines for things like West Nile.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. That
I was
caught
like,
my attention too. I
was like,
my opinion.
There's Drake. What's you doing, Drake? He's in that for everybody that wondered about what the reference to Drake in the beginning of the podcast. That, folks, is a poodle pointer.
It's my
Drake.
Slick coat, spoiled poodle pointer. Hey, come here and say hi. Come here.
Hi, Drake. Hi, buddy.
Drake became a dove retrieving machine, by the way, in this hunt last week. I had never taken him dove hunting before, and I purposely set up a blind, like a duck blind scenario, and made him sit in it. And that dude, I don't know, we picked up a bunch of our own birds just because there were so many falling. There were 3 of us shooting, but he retrieved, I'll bet 2/3 of those birds. Maybe
that's
3/4.
awesome, dude.
Great. Sat there like a little gentleman, ran out and got him and came back. So anyway, we digress. But I
want to get into hunting before we're done here in a few minutes. But yeah, talk about that because
bird farm, if I may. Bird farm. I think my biggest issue with it is it's almost an admission of failure, because we're not to the point with sage grouse where we need to be sending people out, basically taking a public resource and putting it into private hands yet. But that point on West Nile virus vaccines and some of that kind of stuff, that actually piqued my interest a little bit.
I think it's going to pique more than one person's interest, because I was of the same opinion to begin with as you. I'm kind of like, man, they went out there and they took wild eggs out of the wild and they hatched them, and well, now they've got literally a reproducing population of grouse on that farm. It's right here. I mean,
Yep.
I can just about shoot a rifle to it, out from where I'm sitting right now. And you drive by there in the spring, and they're strutting, doing their thing, just like. And then you sit there and you walk around, and obviously we got access, so we were able to see some things. But birds sitting on nests on eggs that they've laid, and I'm kind of like, okay, this is kind of cool because. Yeah, we made a sacrifice on some wild birds, but now we've got this thing going. It's established, and I'm not a fan of it being like, okay, we could raise these birds and release them into the wild. Maybe that's last ditch. That's last resort, right?
Well, that's the crux there, though, is that's where it ends, because the only reason we still have Atwater's prairie chicken, by and large, is because of a captive breeding program, but they do not reproduce in the wild, and most don't survive.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Demonstrating you can raise sage grouse has been done. I mean,
right.
Greg Johnson did it years ago in Wyoming.
Right.
Others have done it here in Colorado and other places. It's that last final step of getting the young birds that are reintroduced to the wild to actually reproduce in the wild. And that has not been established for native prairie grouse. It's been successful with condors and ferrets and some other things, but those are truly endangered species, and it's kind of a last ditch effort. And again, that's been my biggest issue with it, and some of how it came about through.
There was some political stuff that was kind of like, but again, it goes back to our earlier conversation. We got to have those hard conversations. We got to be willing to be flexible and go, just because I don't like this and agree with it, I need to find out what it's about. And I'm glad I went out there. I'm glad I went out there.
Man. You guys are a media outlet. I mean, you're a company.
Yeah.
Should be.
You got to look at all of it. You got to look at all of it. You got to get all the perspectives, and then present it in a way that the mainstream media today doesn't. I'm going to lay it all out there and let you talk about it and decide for yourself, and I'm going to tell you what I think, but at the end of the day, if we agree, cool. If we don't, cool. But we're all working at the same end goal, is the hope, and that was the idea with the film. And like I said, we're really close. I'm excited. We're going to launch it it's going to play on Outdoor Channel, obviously on YouTube, all across. I think we're trying to do a film showing series with DSC, with Dallas Safari Club. They really, really liked it. We went down and did with the Wyoming chapter in Casper, and it was a big hit down there. Everybody really liked it.
Yeah.
And we just showed the short version. So they want to do create a film showing. I think we're going to drop it into some film festivals.
You should do it at the Western Hunt Expo. Work that out with those folks.
I kind of have a connection there, so I might just pull that string. No, that's something that we've talked about as well, how getting that involved in there and just trying to get that message out, but
I sure appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Well, and I really appreciate you putting in. I've only been filmed twice hunting. Once was with Ranella and Cranes, and you and I sage grouse hunting, and you put in that spectacular shot that I made.
Of course I put it in there.
I looked at that shot and went, damn, man. The bird was out there.
I tell you what, we happened to be, Federal provided the ammunition for that. And I used to be of the opinion that a lead shot shell was a lead shot shell, right? A quarter, an ounce and a quarter of lead sixes was all the same. And I tell you what, that prairie storm stuff is a different animal. And not just, your shot on that bird. And I've seen guys since then on other hunts, and I've personally made shots that I just go, that's unbelievable. Did that just really happen?
Right.
But yeah, I had to put that shot in there.
There was another one that didn't make it. Remember that first night we hunted? That one was about the same.
Because our cameramen weren't filming at that time. Right. They were tired and walking along and looking at the ground.
Right.
Come on, guys, do your jobs.
But they got the one that counted. So
no, that was super cool. That was super
you guys
cool.
did a really good job on it. Tells a great story. So I hope everybody watches it and gets something out of it.
Yeah, I hope so too. But what's next for Ed coming up?
Sage grouse this weekend.
I was just going to say
sage grouse. I'm going to try for the trifecta, but that's a lot of different habitats to hit. But I'm going to try over the weekend to get blues. I don't call them duskies, but dusky for anyone that does. Blues, sage grouse, and sharptail, Colombian sharptails in northwest Colorado. That this weekend. Then I go to Croatia. Everybody, or not everybody, but a couple of people asked me, what was your highlight of the summer? It's like, it's coming up because it's still summer, and I'm heading to Croatia next week, actually, for 7 days for a big renewable energy conference that I've been part of for a long while. But when I get back, I'll come up to Wyoming and hunt sage grouse.
There's the old man.
Then I think I'm going to go to Montana. Yep, the old lab just walked in. Those guys found a skunk yesterday.
Oh,
yeah. I spent day before yesterday in the evening, so I spent yesterday at the lake with some peroxide and soap and baking powder, baking soda.
Check out the Technu products. I did a video on them it's on our gear lab. Mackinac got into a skunk in late winter, just one of those warm days, and happened to get into one. And I used some of and I don't remember what exactly the product is, but it's in there. And it washes it out like one use, boom, no more.
Wow.
It's incredible. Huh. Ike's wife hit a skunk with her car, and he washed the car, took it to the car wash, and he washed it with this Technu, like a mixture of this Technu stuff in the sprayer, and it took all the smell off the car.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff. But and I don't remember which one it is, but yeah, that's on the YouTube channel. Just have a look for it. But
I'll check it out.
Well, that's cool. Croatia, and then
I wish I was hunting in Croatia, but I'm not, so I couldn't put that together.
You're gonna go talk about bats, right?
I'm going to talk about a number of things, but yeah, and moderate a session. So yeah, I'm on a science advisory committee for this international wind conference.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've been doing that for a while, and it's kind of fun. As long as they keep asking me and flying me over to faraway places, I'll go.
I was going to say, I'd like to travel more than I get to. Being a family man, I don't get to travel as much as I'd like. Right. Brandon Mason and I were just lamenting the fact that last year at this time we were in Canada. We were in Alberta shooting geese and hunting bears, and I'm like, dude, I miss that. I want to go back so bad. And in fact, we just dropped the YouTube video on that one on I think Friday or Saturday. So that hunt's out there to watch, and I'm watching it and going back, looking at it, and I'm like, oh, so I'm working really hard to get my 8-year-old into totally addicted to hunting. My kids like to hunt. They like to go, and it's never been a problem, and I just don't give them the choice, right? It's like, no, you're 8. You don't know what's best for you. I do. I'm your parent. So you're going with me.
Right.
But I wanted to get JC Rapp involved in the mentor program and get her started.
Oh, cool.
And get her out and get a gun in her hands and let her shoot some birds. And in Wyoming, Colorado, I think is the same. The mountain grouse species, rough grouse and blue grouse. I'm the same as you. I don't call them duskies. But mountain grouse you can shoot with a 22 long rifle.
Yeah.
And any rim fire, actually 17, whatever, or shotgun or bow or a stick or a rock. I mean, there's and it's just it's designed that way so guys at hunting camp or big game hunting can take a grouse legally any way they want. But it's awesome because what we've got going on right now is there's nothing else to do. I've got an elk tag, but it's a late season tag. And so I'm not, I wouldn't worry about it, dude.
Dog in and out. Barking.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, the first is that's what's open: doves and mountain grouse. And so that's what I'm focused on for the month of September. It's like, went out on the dove opener, shot a couple of doves, went out the next day, shot a few more, had my 6-year-old with me. on the second day, and
cool.
it's fun. I took the 6-year-old and the old lab. I took Mackinac on the second day. The first day, Hondo got all the work, and it wasn't a lot of work, but he got a little bit. And it was funny because Mackinac does not like to fetch doves. All those feathers in his mouth, and he's just like,
really don't.
Not my thing. Yeah, he'll do it, but begrudgingly. And it's perfect for my 6-year-old because she wants to pick up every bird that she finds. And when you're dropping the ones that are out there and easy to get, she'll run out and get them. And then the ones that are falling to sagebrush or something, that's what the dog's for. And it works perfectly that way. But I tell you what, man, it's just trying to get those kids hooked on it and involved in it, because I feel like there's so many competing interests in today's world.
They have tons of choices.
Yeah, and if I don't get them excited about it my kids have been going with me since they were 4, and so if I don't get them excited about it then early on, and it's just, hey, this is just what we do, there's not much hope that they're going to be proponents of hunting and of conservation later in life.
That was a real nice touch in the sage grouse video too, you and your kids. That was good.
Thank you.
No, it really was. I mean, it was really nice to,
every now and then you utter,
and
I'm saying that it's just like you as in like general you, not you personally. But I said something in that video that I didn't even remember. Didn't even remember saying it until I watched it. And it's towards the end of the video, and we're sitting there, and I've got my daughters, and I'm kind of down on one knee, and we're watching these birds on the lek, and beautiful, super cold morning, but beautiful sunshine. And I looked at them and I said, and both my daughters are born in Wyoming. And I looked at those birds and I looked at my kids and I was like, those birds are as Wyoming as you are.
Yep. That was really cool.
And I was like, and I didn't realize I said it. And then I went back and watched it and I was like, wow. Yeah. Every now and then I do say something smart.
How profound, Helms.
Yeah, something like that. Don't start taking yourself too seriously
deep thoughts with Todd Helms.
Yeah, that's my next podcast series right there. Great. Oh man. yeah. I'll give you a ribeye steak the next time I see you. But
I hope I can get up this fall and see.
If you do, give me a shout. You've always got a spot in the duck blind. I know last year it didn't work out. I think I was filming something else and you came through and we didn't get to hook up, but that's just kind of the way.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Well, I knew you were busy, so I went.
Okay.
I didn't come through that direction. I went through eastern Montana and went home. Nasty blizzard. So yeah, that was a rough drive. I have about 3 white knucklers in my life, and that was one of them. Yeah,
those aren't fun, man. That's one thing about where we live is we usually get to avoid. If you come down, there were 2 trails. Now I'm history lesson here. If there were 2 trails that are now roadways, one was the Bozeman Trail that goes up along the face of the Bighorns and up to Bozeman, right? And that one today still is I-25. That's the Bozeman Trail. And then there was the Bridger Trail that Jim Bridger tried to promote, and it came up through the Bighorn Basin in Wyoming along the Bighorn River, and it never got popular, but it's the easier route and it's got better weather. So it's but it's 2-lane, it's all highway, it's not interstate, so you don't make any time, right. But anyway,
you can enjoy more of Wyoming.
Yeah, that's what I think too. But well, dude, if you get up this way, give me a shout. I'd love to see you. Have fun. Good luck. Have fun. Be safe in Croatia and enjoy your time over there. Eat the good food, drink the good drink, and
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It looks like a lovely country. So
yeah, I've never been. It would be neat.
I'll give you a scouting report. But
yeah, do it.
But yeah, then when we get back, hopefully get some more water. I want to get more waterfowl hunting in this year. And
yeah, man, you got a spot in the blind with me anytime you want. So just come on up and we'll go do it. That'll be fun.
Not a matter of if, just when.
Cool. Ed, I appreciate you as always, man. Thank you for the awesome conversation. I don't know how we burn an hour and a half and it feels like 5 minutes, but we usually do. So this was a good one, as always. I appreciate it, man.
That was great. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to you. It's always
Yes,
a pleasure.
sir. Yep, absolutely. Well, take care, and I will talk to you later.